Hello again, and here we are, and we are finally made it. Habit number 7, and we can still hear Stephen Covey rolling in his grave, I guess. But anyway, we've made it. So all of you that have been tracking along with the 7 habits, thank you very much, and thank you for all the comments. They've been very kind. So let's go straight into this one because time is precious for us all. So this one is quite an exciting one, and I have a story to tell on this one, and I believe so does Mike. And this one is entitled Sharpen the Saw. Sharpen the Saw. So I'm going to kick off, if I may, Mike, and tell us a story. Once upon a time. Are you sitting comfortably? So once upon a time, there was this competition. It's a competition that took place once a year, and the locals are very proud of it. And the competition simply was who could cut down more trees in a given time than the other person. And there was this young man, and he was unbeaten. He's been unbeaten for many years. And he was, one of these really frisky young men, and the muscles everywhere that counts. And this particular year, this old guy decided that he was going to take him on, and everyone laughed at him because they thought there's no ways this old guy's going to win. So there they are, they're standing at the start line, and in front of them are all of these trees, and the guy is about to press his button, and they're going to go. So they count down 3, 2, 1, and off they go. The young man rushes into the trees, swinging his axe violently, and there's stuff going everywhere, and there's trees falling, and the crowd's going wild. Meanwhile, the old man immediately sits down, and he gets this old pummel stone out of his pocket, and he just starts doing this to the edge of his sword, of his blade. He just sits there for what seemed like an eternity. While he's doing, with every stroke that he is doing his blade, more trees are falling down, and we're all thinking it's impossible. This guy's never going to catch up. Eventually, the old man struggles to his feet, wanders up to the first tree, and with one precise hit, the whole tree falls down. And he slowly starts working through the trees, and more trees start falling down, and then he'd stop, and he'd sit down, and he'd start doing his sword again. But slowly, tree by tree, he starts catching up on the young person until right to the very end, he overtakes the young guy and gets to the finish line. The young guy screams in, upset, and that he's been defeated by an old man, sweating, tired. The old man looks just like the time when he started. And the moral of the story is that he who sharpens the saw always wins. How's that for a story?
Very good, Davey.
Michael.
I still don't believe with one hit he gets the tree over, but but we get the story. Yeah. No, it's great. I think of all Covey's 7 habits, this is the one that's probably, where you look at it and you go, oh, I know that. It's sort of like the Durr one, and yet it's the one that we possibly ignore so quickly and easily. So here's the deal, I suppose. We're actually doing some cards at the moment on resilience, and it's a product that we're going to be releasing. But one of our categories in resilience is pretty much this one, and we've just called it the word spark. But you can go to the greatest universities, learn the greatest insights on resilience, do some really fantastic stuff. But if you're not sleeping well at night, if you're not looking after your body, it doesn't matter what else you do. Your resilience is going to be sort of at a low level because you're not sharpening the saw.
Mm.
And it just gets us back to 101 of simple, wholehearted, good living. I love what Marianne Williamson says, and she's quite tough. She says you can't trash a body and expect to have health.
So true. Yeah.
It's like, doesn't matter how much positive affirmations you do, what you claim, if you're trashing your body, it's going to have an impact.
Yeah. It's the old story of the person who runs out of fuel because he was too busy to put fuel in. And I think it ties in with so many of the habits that we've discussed. But one of them, remember we talked about the quadrants, what's important and not urgent.
Yes.
It's like our bodies are like any mechanical device. You can thrash it for a long time before it's going to complain, but eventually it's going to complain and stop working. And then the cost of repairing that thing is huge, detrimental, and sometimes irreversible.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that this lockdown situation has really helped us with is the ability to slow down and to
Yeah.
take stock of what really is important. What should I be doing and what shouldn't I be doing? The pace of life has certainly had to slow down, right? And I
Mm.
think evaluation has taken place on a lot of people. And I'll be very interested to see how much time people do give to work and to rest and to those other things that are life-giving. Certainly in my life, I've given a lot more time and focus to my music, and to these podcasts, for instance. And these are, for me, these are sword sharpening times.
Yeah.
They bring rest in my body. They lower the cortisone levels. They keep us to an even keel. And I think these are healthy things that we've learned from this lockdown period.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we go back to sort of ancient ways of living, and it's not ancient for many people, but we've spoken a little bit about it in a previous one, but there's some small things that we can do, like what's your 2 minutes in every hour. But then we get back to the whole principle of something like Sabbath,
Mm,
um, and just where you give yourself a day to really have a totally different rhythm. And whether something like Sabbath is informed by religious faith type of traditions or not,
mm.
just the wisdom of that whole concept of a day off that's got a totally different rhythm, so that you can come back and do 6 days or 5 days or 4 days of hopefully really good work.
I love.
And then the yeah
I love, Jesus teaches in the Bible this line when it turns to the Sabbath. He says that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Which
yeah
what was happening? For those that may not know, what was happening was the religious people were just making the Sabbath another set of to-do lists that people had to obey. Um, and yet Jesus came back and he was saying to them, no, the Sabbath is essential for you as humans to be able to restore and revitalize the energy that's needed. It's not a set of to-do lists. And the Sabbath for me isn't necessarily a day. It's a principle that we have to have in our lives. The principle of having. There was a guy called Rick Warren years ago. He said 10 minutes in every 10 minutes in every day, a day in every week, a week in every month, a week in every year. And he was just saying we've got to build these principles of rejuvenation into our
yeah
lives, rest.
yeah and you're doing it so that you can come back strong. So sometimes we think, well, I'm being lazy, but I think Sharpen the Saw. So if we go back to Covey, he does divide it quite beautifully into 4 quadrants, where he talks about it's sharpening the saw physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and each of those are really important. And sometimes we're good in one area, but not necessarily great in another area. And so I suppose that's the beauty of a time period where it's actually a focus on the whole person. And that's why it's nice if you can have certain periods of your day or week or year where it's a totally different rhythm,
Mm, mm,
so that it's nourishing not just your body, but every part of you. But
mm.
we do it so that we can so that we can return and do great work.
Yeah.
We have a, whatever we call it, Sabbath, or I've got a term which I call Tuscany, and maybe I'll get to that now. But we have these things so that we can be the great father, so that we can be the great manager, so that we can show up at work. It's not being lazy; it's being human, so that we can do some really good stuff.
I love that.
So
Tell the Tuscany story, because I think that's really powerful.
yeah. So a couple of years ago, when I say a couple of years ago, sure, 12, 13 years ago, I was doing a workshop, a 3-day workshop with an insurance group along the Vaal River, which is one of the bigger rivers in South Africa. And a friend of mine who was co-facilitating with me had brought along some DVDs, which he was just showing during our breaks. And at the one break, he put on a clip or a DVD by Andrea Bocelli called Under the Tuscan Skies. And I was just sitting there, and as I watched this opening scene from the DVD, you know when insight is just coming, when something's happening, and you're just going, "Wow, this is amazing." I wish I had time, but we'll do it really quickly. The DVD starts with Andrea Bocelli, great Andrea Bocelli, in his tux in the back seat of a limo, nighttime, and you can see all the neon lights, and he's in the middle of London. But every now and again, when I say every now and again, every couple of seconds, the footage goes to an auditorium. And in the auditorium is a large group of people, predominantly 40 plus, an older audience. And you can see they're expectant, and they focus on a specific balding man who you can see is very, very excited about what's going to happen. Goes back to Bocelli, goes back to the audience. But eventually we have Bocelli at the side of the stage, and he's led onto the stage, and audience absolutely erupts. And our boarding man is excited, huge anticipation. And Bocelli begins to sing. We skip 2 hours, he sings the last note, standing ovation, and our boarding man's got like tears in his eyes. This has obviously been a really, really great experience. Suddenly we see Bocelli back in the limo, and he's a little bit more relaxed, and he starts speaking in Italian, but the English subscripts say something like this. He says, I've been blessed to have been on the most incredible stages in the world, but the more I perform, the more I know I need to return.
Mm.
And that's a beautiful word. So the more I do this, the more I know I need to return. And all of a sudden, we have Bocelli in Tuscany. And the first song shows clippings of him as a kid, and in modern day, where he's walking down a sand road, doesn't need to be led, as a child playing with a frog, playing with his father, and just beautiful scenes of a very, very different persona compared to the one on the stage. And then we have 10 songs of just Under the Tuscan Skies. And what really spoke to me about that video clip was all of us need a stage, and we need a Tuscany. And if I'm facilitating this with a group, I sometimes sort of lead them on a bit, but I would say, what's more important, the stage or Tuscany? And you can have quite a bit of conversations. People give their viewpoints, but the bottom line is it's an unfair question. We need both. Because the stage, if we're on the right stage, now that's another topic. If we're on the right stage, the stage is a place of contribution. The stage is a place where I live my purpose. The stage is the place where I do good work, and hopefully I make bald men cry in a good way. But none of us can just, even if we're as talented as Bocelli, you can't just be on the stage day in and day out. You have to go to the place of recovery, which is Tuscany. The place where you can be yourself, the place where you don't need to be led, the place where your handicap's not a problem. Because all of us have got a handicap in some form or another. The place where we can just be us so that we can go back to the stage.
Yeah. You know, I love what you're saying. The more I do this, the more I need to do that. The more I need on the stage, the more I need my rest. You know, and I think it is exponential. The more we output, the more we need to input. I mean, it's not rocket science. You know, and I think, but it is about being intentional. I think when we talk about sharpening the saw, we're talking about intentionality. You know, Covey talks about putting the big rocks in first and then putting the little rocks in. You remember him doing that analogy once. You know, he said, how do I fit all this in? Well, you put the big rocks in first. And the big rocks, we don't necessarily go and say the big rocks are rest, the big rocks are holiday, but actually they are, you know. And as we come out of lockdown, as we are around the world, people are thinking now about their calendars. And I guess the temptation will be to cram these last 3 months of non-productivity into the last 6 months of the year. And I guess the lesson that we need to hear is, if you're going to do that, then you need to increase the amount of rest you do. Intentionally,
Yeah, you know what I really like about the Bocelli sort of thing is, if you want to do world-class work, introduce rest into what you do. If
Mm.
you're happy to do mediocre work, yeah, then by all means, just keep going.
Yeah.
But I know it sounds quite hard, but it will eventually be mediocrity. I love what Brene Brown says, and she says, when people get into my head, I seek to please, produce, perform, perfect. How good is that, eh? Um, and I think we live in a world where the way the world has sometimes got into our head is we've got to produce, we've got to consume, we just got to keep going, going, going. You know, Dave, you spoke quite a bit about it, that cortisol rush. And yeah, you know, maybe lockdown does teach us. I suppose the concern is for many of us in lockdown, you actually asked this question last week just when we were talking. You were saying you do worry that you might get out of lockdown and say, did I make use of the time to actually sharpen the saw? And I know you have, but you've been playing the piano and stuff like that. But you know, I think this habit is about challenging us to walk a different walk, dance a different dance. To this whole thing of just go, go, go. That's not fun.
I love it. I love what you're saying. I think, you know, there seems to be two camps in the world. There's the guys that want to exit life and just find a campsite somewhere and just sit there and strum a guitar for the rest of the world. And for them, you know, that's all one should be doing. And then there's the other camp that, you know, just want to be producing all the time. And I love the fact that we need to marry both of these things together. You know, and it's not this or that, it's this and that. It's I guess we talked about synergy yesterday, didn't we? And I guess real synergy is when we can bring rest into our busyness. And find synergy. Wow.
Yeah, it's essential, you know. And by the way, I'm talking quite hard, but the mirror, I look in the mirror and it's like, you need to apply these things. And yeah, absolutely, because that's to say, when people, this thing gets into our head, and sometimes it's, you know, just this absolute survival mentality that we have. I must say, I've tried to make Saturday not sort of observing Sabbath like, say, a strict Orthodox Jewish person would, but I've certainly tried to make Saturday that day that must have a different rhythm. And you know, where it's not about learning more material, doing extra work. It's got to have a different rhythm, and it's such a nice experience when you're living that. You know?
I love that. We've done the same at home because of the lockdown, and we're locked in these four walls. Is to have to make the weekend different from the week. It's a great discipline. You know, lie in bed a little longer, take things a little slower, do things differently, turn the computer off. You know, and you know what I've done. I know not a lot of people have the luxury. I've got two computers, and one is my work computer, and the other one has no work access on it at all. You know, I've stripped away email and all of that stuff, so that there is two different worlds. You know, otherwise the temptation is to be always pulled in. This has been a fantastic chat, and I think it's been a great series. And I think maybe to wrap it up, Mike, tomorrow let's do a podcast where we take all seven and we kind of do a final overview and wrap it up. How's that sound to you?
Great, yeah, good, lovely.
That's good. Well, until tomorrow then, my friend. All the best.
Cool. Thanks, Davey. Cheers.